Me and my daughter, Anya, are from India. Our native language is Hindi. She's 11 years old now. Her father died when she was 5 and I immigrated to States because everyone was trying to get me remarried to a 60-year-old sleazebag. Because...
Oh no.
However will a woman live or raise a child alone? I started dating my now husband when Anya was 6. He had a 5-year-old son, Ben, 50% custody. Me, Anya, Ben, husband and Ben's mom get along really well. The kids were very well adjusted and they were genuinely happy when we got married. Whenever tensions arose, we dealt with them patiently. Let's just say after walking through the minefield of Indian family / drama, diffusing these toy bombs were very easy. Anya has a habit of talking in Hindi when she gets really excited. Sometimes, while talking to me, she starts talking in Hindi without even realizing it. This wasn't a problem. If she does that while others are around, I would remind her and she would revert back to English. Few months ago, Ben's mom passed away and he came to live with us full time. He has a room already and we put Ben into therapy immediately. A week ago, Ben walked in when me and Anya were cooking and we were talking in Hindi and he started crying. He told me he is feeling bad that he can't understand what we are saying. I hugged him and consoled him and assured him that we didn't do it to exclude him purposefully. And then Anya started crying and apologized. The whole thing was just heartbreaking. Since then, Anya has been making conscious efforts to talk only in English and I can tell that it puts Ben at ease. Yesterday, however, she was frustrated and started lamenting about schoolwork in Hindi to me. Me and Anya were in the living room and Ben and husband were in the kitchen and they heard it. Later that night, my husband told me how he thinks we must start thinking about giving punishments whenever she speaks in Hindi unconsciously until Ben starts feeling better. I was horrified at this suggestion. I have never pulled the "she is my daughter, not yours" card. But this is the hill I am willing to die on and use that card if necessary. Whether he likes it or not, it's her first language. Expecting her to always converse in her second language, even when she is feeling some extreme emotions, is just cruel. Especially after she is genuinely making an effort to make Ben feel more comfortable. It's almost like punishing for her heritage or for her being Indian. Of course, this is a huge point of conflict between me and my husband. I think it's unfair to do this to Anya, even temporarily. He thinks me and Anya are unnecessarily making feel Ben bad while he is mourning his mother, while we can try and prevent it. Both of us are conflicted here. I met this guy about 18 months ago, and we've been together since. He knows about my employment history, and he said that he has no issue with it. Though he did ask me to tell his family the white lie I occasionally use on my CV and stuff, which is that I was a waitress. A month ago we found out that I'm 2 months pregnant. He says this is great news, and we should move in together. I assumed he'd be moving into my place because he rents his far smaller 1-bedroom flat while I own mine. And I have room for a baby's room while he doesn't. Also, I really don't want to leave my flat. It's my flat, I love it, I could see myself living here for the rest of my life. And I don't want to lose the security of owning a flat and have to go back to paying rent or a mortgage each month. However, he then said that he didn't want to move into my place, and said I should sell it and we buy a place together. I said that I like my place, it means a lot to me that I was able to buy it. And it represents years of working my arse off scrimping and saving. He then said that he understands all of that. But we should be living together by the time the baby comes and he didn't want to live in my flat. I asked him why not. It's a great flat, it's central to everything, it's spacious, it's got room for all his stuff. There's a daycare in the building, run / owned by another tenant, and a school 5-minute walk away, the list goes on. And he said that he didn't want to live in a flat that was bought with stripper money. That really pissed me off, and I told him no. Why am I selling my flat and that he never had an issue with my stripper money paying for this flat before now? I said I wasn't giving up the security of owning a home for someone who tries to make me feel ashamed about something I don't feel ashamed of. He said that his point is if I sold the flat then we could get a new place with the money from the sale. I said, wouldn't that still be stripper money? And he said that's different, and I asked how. He then said he was going back to his place because I can't talk to you when you're in this state. He's gone back to his flat now and he's texted me saying I'm overreacting / irrational and I need to think of this realistically, rather than emotionally. He says he wouldn't feel right raising a child in my flat knowing how I purchased it and selling / moving is the best idea of all of us, not to mention the fact he isn't on the deed because it's my place and it would never feel like our place because of this. I feel I might be the arse because I get why he might feel like it's just my place and I feel I'm being too rigid in a time we need to work together. Plus I spoke to my sister and she sided with him, so 2 out of 3 people think I'm in the wrong here. I dumped him. There was a whole conversation and during the conversation he said he didn't want to be a parent if I wasn't willing to do everything he wanted, including sharing a house / deed, plus staying together. Also, at the start of the conversation I said what a few people suggested, which was that I'd be willing to sell and split the house with him, provided he paid 50%, and he got very, very angry. Very, very quickly. He also said a few other things, how it's all going to pan out just yet, but it looks like I'm going to be a single mother. I have been with my partner for 7 years. We initially met online, and after meeting in person a few times, and realizing our affection for one another, we found it promising to move in together. I moved from California to Pennsylvania to be with him throughout graduate school. All was seemingly well during this time. I have never really had any reason to not trust him. I encouraged him to very much so, to try his best to make friends, or to explore hobbies on his own outside of the various ones we share, because I have my own passions. And I found we connected most when we met in the middle through conversations about these passions, through the act of explaining or showcasing what we've taken in or learned. Throughout these 7 years, he has struggled with very low self-esteem, and though I don't necessarily think of myself as the pillar of self-love, the depth of mine doesn't reach the low perception of his self-value. Because of this, he has seen and stopped seeing both a counselor and a therapist, and has been on medication to help for the last 6 months. Things were seemingly well between us, and continued to be pretty fluid. We continued to share things, and take long walks, and were pretty open-ended about where we stood in the relationship. If one was feeling a bit of an ebb, the other would pick up more of a share, and vice versa. However, things took a bit of a dip about 2 days ago when I felt the ebb and asked him about it. Initially, he said there was really nothing wrong. And perhaps I was just feeling this way because with our schedules we haven't been able to see one another for long periods of time like we are used to, which is true. But the feeling continued to irk me, and when I asked about it a second time, he confessed to me he had begun talking to another girl from another country via Instagram direct messages. And though things between she and him never crossed the boundaries of platonic friendship, he really loved the initial rush of someone asking him questions about his favorite movie, his favorite album, his favorite book. All things he and I already know very well about one another. I asked if he'd sent any selfies, or anything risque, and he said no, though I can't confirm, because he deleted the messages. A good deal of me believes him, because of how open he was about the initial conversations to begin with. We slept apart, and I just felt really confused the entire night, because I couldn't really resonate with wanting that sort of attention from someone else. If anything, his yearning for that type of attention sort of hurt. It felt like I wasn't doing enough, or giving enough. The next morning, though I don't have an Instagram, and am not on the app, I went to check his using the desktop version, and found that posts where he once called me the love of his life, or a specific post with a gift I gave him that once said, "Greatest gift from the greatest girl," were still on his profile, but the words, girlfriend, or love of my life, were completed erased. With this realization, my confusion and hurt turned to very real heartache. I called him and asked if he had deleted these words from the specific posts, and with shame, he said yes, he did. When I asked why, he said it was because he just didn't want the attention from the girl asking him about himself to be disrupted if she found out he was in a long-term relationship. I guess this is where I asked the obvious and questioned why someone who is just asking about your favorite books, movies, etc., would be driven away by the fact that you have a girlfriend. And he said he didn't know why he did it, and that it was a massive mistake. At the risk of seeming toxic, and I will take full accountability for seeming so or being so, I asked him to please deactivate his Instagram for the time being while we sort through this, his Twitter as well. He did, and though I was feeling a bit of relief about that, I couldn't help but feel a bit saddened that he didn't choose to do that on his own for the benefit of our relationship. He had to wait for me to ask. Which again, just made me feel like such a toxic and controlling partner. Two things I always strive to be so far from. When he got home from work, we discussed everything at massive length, and he continued to swear up and down that these conversations pertained strictly to music, movies, and books, and he didn't have interest in her. Just interest in the initial rush of the attention he was receiving. We read a few articles, and he broke things down to me as his self-esteem has never been lower. Despite his career as a doctor being at a high, and his finances in order, he felt things with his music weren't taking off. And with that came a feeling that he wasn't special, and it was nice for someone to make him feel that way. I felt shame and asked him if I wasn't doing enough or giving enough to him to make him feel that way. He said, I defiantly was. But my love, and attention and affection, became a pillar he could rely on, and got used to, so with new attention came a rush. And he liked that. I asked him if he wanted to be single, and find that rush in dating new people. And he kept insisting that that's so far from what he wants. He wants to remain a couple, and do all he can to work on these things together. Though I can't help but correlate that feeling he enjoys with the feeling of a first date. Which hurts, of course. I told him I didn't really see how we could move past this because there was nothing much for me to make an attempt to work on moving forward. This seems to be a self-stemming problem that I emphasize with, but just don't want to be on the receiving end of the counter effects. So though it is incredibly uneasy to begin to think of how difficult it'll be to begin again, it is just as difficult to think about how difficult it would be to stay and try to rebuild back up an issue that I feel like just a bystander. When it comes to this has all been very painful, and if this comes to an end, I just want it to be as civil and as possible. He deserves to love himself, but not at the expense of the love we have between us. I deserve love that is stable and comforting, and not laced with newfound paranoia. Despite this all, my heart is still very much in this, of course, and he has been very vocal about how it was just one mistake. Nothing happened, we can work through this, etc. And I secretly keep hoping he will make a step, any step really, to showcase these words and implement action. Seek a new therapist. Find the two of us a relationship counselor, buy a book on self-help or on how couple conquer affairs, anything at all. Without me having to be the one to ask him. I just want him to have that yearning that he continues to say he has, but instead of saying it, I was him to show me. That makes me irrational or just plain dumb. I believe to be in a state where I can handle either answer. Or something completely different just the same. Do all think I'm blowing something completely out of proportion? Given how this was an exchange of conversation between him and another girl for just a few days. And his erasure of me on his profile was only for about 2 days? This has been a first in this relationship, this has been a first in my life truthfully. I just felt completely vulnerable and isolated. My husband and I come from the same background. The only difference is that his mother isn't of that ethnicity, so he wasn't raised in the culture like I was. When we started dating, I helped him reconnect with his roots. This eventually led to him reaching out to his estranged father's family and becoming close with them. I think my mother-in-law has sort of held that against me ever since. Throughout the course of our relationship, she has made multiple comments about how she doesn't like the amount of emphasis I put on my heritage. When we told her I was pregnant with twins, she later said something about not wanting her future grandchildren to care about that stuff like I do. I've learned to ignore her comments because trying to explain myself to her has never helped. And I try to avoid conflicts whenever I can. My husband and I decided that the babies would have a first name from our culture, and their middle name would be a typical American name. My parents did the same thing with my name too, so it was just a continuation of that tradition. My mother-in-law ended up seeing texts between me and my husband where we said the middle names. But she assumed that we were talking about first names, so she went out and got the babies matching sweaters, with the names printed on the front of them. She showed the sweaters to me after they arrived. And I thanked her for the gift but didn't correct her on the fact that those were the middle names. I was sort of peeved that she had snooped through text messages to try to find out the names before we told her anyway. So I didn't want to give her their first ones on top of that. Last night when she was over at our house, she told me how relieved she was that we had chosen normal names for her grandchildren. And not a ridiculously difficult to pronounce name like mine. My husband asked what she was talking about. She repeated herself and he told her that actually, the babies did have names just like mine and he expected her to learn to say them. She brought up the text messages and the sweaters she bought, and then my husband explained our plan for their names. She got really pissed at me after that. Said I let her look like a fool for accepting the sweaters instead of telling her the actual names, which we still haven't shared with her, and that she'd be calling them by their middle names since that's what she knows them as now. My husband ended up asking her to leave. And after she was gone he said he wasn't upset at me or anything but that he thinks I should have just told her she had the wrong info, instead of lying.